Hey guys, Trey here, back with another video today. We've got an enhanced risk from basically central Illinois, Indiana, down through the Mississippi River Valley there toward eastern Arkansas, northwest Mississippi, surrounded by slight and marginal risk areas. In that enhanced area, though, we've got the highest potential for tornadoes in that 10% hatched area there, the yellow area, including the potential for a strong tornado or two along with a damaging wind threat and a hail threat early on in the convective cycle here across southeast Missouri, southwest Illinois, northern Arkansas. But I think the main threats with this system are going to be the tornado threat and the damaging wind threat. Hail not going to be too much of a concern with this event, but pretty potent system we have on tap here, especially for December standards. So let's get into things here. And I'll be honest with you, this is basically the first time I'm looking at data for this system. I'm back home in Arizona right now, so haven't really been paying too much attention to this system over the past few days. So this is going to be mostly my first look at this system with you guys here. So let's go ahead and take a look, dive in. And this is our water vapor satellite imagery here. You can see a few little swirls there in the moisture field here. But here's our main player. Big, potent trough here across the western half of the United States, digging down, ejecting into the plains, and eventually into the Midwest later on this afternoon. You can see that really clearly here on our 500 millibar map. Now, we a lot of times see these troughs that really like to dig down into the southern part of the U.S., Mexico, even farther south. That is not really the case with this one. I wouldn't call this one a low amplitude trough, more kind of a middle of the road amplitude, I would say, if you will. And I oftentimes get a little bit more worried as far as a tornado threat with these sort of lower amplitude systems. A lot of times when you have those real deep digging troughs, you'll get more meridional or north-south flow in the exit region, our main sort of bullseye region, which in turn allows the shear vectors to be more parallel to the initiating boundary, and you get more of a squall line, more linear storm mode, which heightens the damaging wind threat, decreases the strong tornado threat. With these, with a little bit more zonal or westerly flow aloft, that's not really the case with most of these. Now we'll take a look at some products later that will tell us what our storm mode is going to be. But right off the bat, this has me a little bit concerned that we'll get that the supercell mode may be more in the cards with this event, at least initially. So we'll take a look at that in a second here. Let's go down to 850 millibars. Here we've got a very broad, expansive low-level jet here, upwards of 40 to 50 knots here across the southern plains, extending all the way into the Midwest here and the Mid-South. So a very broad, strong, low-level jet here. That is a sign that we're going to get pretty ample moisture advection here throughout the day. And if we take a look at our surface map here, we already see that is ongoing here. First of all, we've got our surface low out here in western Kansas, very well-defined cyclonic circulation there at the surface, centered here across western Kansas, with a warm front extending off to the east somewhere in there, and kind of our cold front here trailing back to the west there. Fairly strong winds here at the surface, 20 knots or so, 10 to 20 knots here across Arkansas, Missouri. That's going to pump that moisture northward, and we'll change sectors here and see. Yeah, so if we go to our sectors here, we have this reservoir of 70s dew points here from eastern Texas all the way into Louisiana, southern Mississippi, southern Alabama. That is going to continue to advect northward throughout the day to the south of this main synoptic sort of warm front here. And if we go back to our satellite view, let me go to our visible satellite here, see if we can zoom in just a tad. You'll notice we have pretty decent cloud cover here across the warm sector, although we do have some breaks in the clouds here. So solar insolation may not be an issue today, and it's going to come down to the timing. When does the main wave sort of eject? When does the forcing get there? as far as whether or not we'll see storms in the daylight hours here. But we do have some sunshine here, although cloudiness is maybe an issue for some of these areas in the warm sector. But I think there's enough breaks in the clouds here too. That doesn't have me super worried about solar insolation, solar heating later on this afternoon. But we'll have to monitor that as we go throughout the day. But again, lots of moisture advection. You can see that in the satellite, this sort of broad fetch of moisture streaming northward into the warm sector. And let's go to 700 millibars, see if we can see any short waves there. Maybe there's one there across northeast Kansas. That shouldn't be too much of a player today. Here's kind of the main sort of 700 millibar trough axis right back in here in New Mexico. This is kind of a positive tilt trough, and normally we like to see negative tilt troughs, but really that doesn't matter a whole lot in terms of the severe weather threat. We know we're going to have strong wind fields across the warm sector, and when this forcing arrives, even though it's kind of positively tilted or neutrally tilted, that's not going to matter. We've still got strong winds rounding the base of that trough into the exit region. So the kinematics are definitely there for a severe weather event there today. Winds out of the southwest, aloft here at 500 millibars, out of the southwest at the surface. So maybe not a ton of turning of the winds with height, but I think speed shear is going to be more of a concern today. So the winds are definitely going to increase in magnitude as we go throughout the atmosphere, and that may compensate a little bit for a somewhat of a lack of directional wind shear in the wind profile today. Let's take a look at some soundings here, and we'll go down to, these are the 12Z soundings. So earlier this morning, and we go down to Lake Charles, and this is a pretty textbook, what we call a loaded gun sounding. We've got lots of instability above this sort of capping inversion here between 850 and 700 millibars here. A little bit of warm, dry air aloft there that's going to cap the atmosphere for, I think, much of the afternoon, although it does look fairly breakable to me. That is not a super sort of a mega cap that's going to inhibit convection for the entire day. I think if we can get a little bit of forcing, and we'll take a look at what the models are showing as far as the timing of when the wave gets to the warm sector, that should be able to be eroded fairly easily, I would think. You can see we've already got some turning here in the low-level wind profile, but not a whole lot as you go throughout the column. We basically got southwesterly winds from about 900 millibars all the way up through the column there, so not a whole lot of turning in the low levels. We do have some, but this is a very nice sounding here as far as severe weather goes. What we call, again, a loaded gun sounding here, and we see that kind of throughout the region here. This is at Shreveport, a little bit stronger of a cap there as you go with northern extent. Here's Little Rock, same thing. Convective temperature only 81 degrees though, and we're already in the mid-70s there in central Arkansas. So I don't think this cap is going to be too difficult to break once we get the forcing there. Now, when are we going to get the forcing there? That's the question. Because a lot of the forecasts have called that this is going to be an after dark event. And again, when you have strong wind fields coming together to meet decent, adequate instability after dark in these regions, that's not a good thing when you have the potential for strong tornadoes after dark. So let's see when we get let's take a look at timing here. So this is the NAM from 12Z this morning. You can see our big trough out here across the western continental United States. Broad swath of strong winds there in sort of the exit region of that trough. And as we go forward in time, we're going to get a little bit of strengthening of the winds here around the kind of the base of that trough. And there's almost sort of two kind of belts of stronger winds here. One coming here out from Texas into the kind of the enhanced risk region there, and then your kind of main trough along the trough axis there, some stronger flow rounding the base of that trough, ejecting into kind of northern Missouri there. So it's kind of hard to tell. We've got adequate winds here, strong winds, a belt of strong winds aloft here. And to not go too deep into the science here, but when you have strong winds aloft, it kind of acts as a vacuum. when you have winds that are displacing air aloft, the atmosphere tries to balance that out by trying to get air from below to rise upward and fill kind of that void from these stronger winds aloft. So this does promote a little bit of rising motion here, at least broad scale, synoptic scale, rising motion here. Let's look at 700 millibars, see if we can see any sort of little short waves in the flow. And you can kind of see a little bit of a kink in the ISO heights there across Missouri here by 18Z. 21Z kind of moves off into Missouri, Illinois. So we could see some early day storms here, I think, farther north into the kind of target area here. Kind of a closed circulation here at 700 millibars. Not a whole lot I'm seeing as far as kinks in the ISO heights here. Farther back to the south. So it's tough to say. Let's see if we can see any prefrontal. Actually, first let's go to our low-level jet, see what that's going to do throughout the day. Again, strong low-level jet already in place with that low-level circulation there, and that's going to remain strong and then increase after dark over a broad area there after dark. But we definitely have an adequate low-level jet here, more than adequate low-level jet for rotating storms here by the afternoon hours. Now let's go to the surface here. A lot of times in these kind of setups you'll see prefrontal sort of surface troughs, little kinks in the isobars here at the surface. Let me see, go to the sector. Let's go to the float here. That'll be good enough. Alright, so we go here, our surface low starts to eject off to the northeast throughout the day up into northern Missouri. Actually, let me back out here real quick. Let me go here. Let's see. This is a little bit better. So this is 12Z here. See that surface low back to the west in Kansas, ejects off to the east. We can see kind of our warm front is going to be up here into central Illinois and Indiana, just out of picture there. And maybe a little bit, something in here, a little bit of kinks in the isobars here as far as prefrontal convection goes, prefrontal surface troughs go. Not a whole lot in the way, though, of prefrontal surface troughs, at least really distinct ones here. So it's going to be a question whether or not we get storms throughout the day. Given the degree of the cap here, I think that is definitely breakable once the forcing arrives, and we are going to have that kind of continued synoptic scale forcing for ascent here throughout the day. And it looks like we actually have a new outlook that has just come out. Let me go ahead and see if we can pull that up. See if they've increased the severe weather probabilities here, and they do. They've put a moderate risk out here. So this is pretty interesting here. They put a moderate risk out here for southern Illinois, extreme southern Illinois, southeast Missouri, northwest Arkansas, into far western Kentucky and Tennessee. And it looks like they have done so for a tornado threat here. Yep, 15 hatched here, tornado threat here. So very interesting. They've upgraded the severe probabilities here. They've kept the wind at 30% unhatched. So this is really going to be a tornado risk here. The main risk with this event looks to be a tornado risk here. So let's continue on, and that's what we've been seeing. We're gonna have a very potent low-level jet here throughout the warm sector. Afternoon initiation remains to be seen, but after dark for sure. I think once this cold front sort of moves off to the east, we get kind of these bands out along and ahead of the front. We will have the potential for tornadoes here. Let's take a look at our moisture. Let's pull a few soundings here. And you can see that continued surge of moisture to the north. Let me back out here so we can get soundings all across the warm sector here. Yeah, so you can see, so our initiating boundary here, this is at 0Z, and we'll do 3Z because it looks like the forcing for sure will arrive here and match up with that warm sector here right about sunset or after. So let's go to 3Z here and take a few soundings. This is from the northern portion of the enhanced risk area. This would be kind of western Illinois there. And so we do have, again, you can see a lot of speed shear here. Not a whole lot of turning with the winds, turning of the winds with height in the low levels. We do have some. There is some sort of curvature in the photograph here. But we do have ample speed shear. You can see we increase pretty rapidly here with height in the low levels. 15 knots at the surface up to 35 knots here, about 900 millibars. Then by 850 millibars, we're up to about 60, up to about 55 knots here. Then we increase further with height. So the speed shear today is what's going to be the main player. We're not going to have too much directional shear, but I think we will have enough sort of directional shear plus ample speed shear to create favorable kinematics in the low levels for tornadoes. These are going to be fast-moving storms, as you can see. The steering flow, I mean, at 500 millibars, we've got 100-knot winds there. So very strong, very quick steering flow. You can see the bunker's right supercell motion here, 64 knots. That is incredible. That is, these storms are going to be racing. Let's go ahead and go farther south down into the open warm sector here. We'll go right along the Mississippi River Delta here, kind of the Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi sort of triple point there out by sort of Tunica and Olive Branch, Mississippi there. A little bit more favorable curvature in the photographs here. This is at 3Z again. We still have some sort of capping remaining though, but a very deep moist layer there, 73 over 67 at the surface, very deep moist layer extending above 850 millibars there. So that is interesting. Not sure, again, if this is a NAM bias here. NAM does tend to hang on to capping a little bit too long. I found in some scenarios capping seems to be a little bit strong. So, but the main thing to see here is that we do have favorable kinematic profiles here for tornadoes here across the warm sector. Let's see what we have in the afternoon just for giggles here. If we do get storms to fire out in the open warm sector, let's go kind of east central Arkansas here. This is at 21Z. So this would be late afternoon, just before sunset here. And we do have a favorable wind profile here for tornadoes. You can see surface winds are kind of veered. We don't have a whole lot of turning here, but the speed shear is pretty solid here throughout the profile. So the profile is adequate for tornadoes. That we're gonna have to watch that capping inversion, see if that lingers throughout the afternoon. If low level lapse rates remain a little bit meager, then that could decrease the significant tornado threat. But obviously, the Storm Prediction Center doesn't think that's going to be the case here. Let's look at storm mode. So we're going to have to watch here if we're going to get storms. I think we'll probably get storms here along the frontal boundary. And we're probably going to get some bands of storms out in the open warm sector. Open warm sector storms tend to be more discrete by nature, just because the forcing out in the warm sector is a little bit weaker, and the prefrontal troughs may be oriented a little bit better with respect to the bulk shear vector. So you get more discrete storms out here in the warm sector. Along the front, though, however, you can see more of a northeast to southwest oriented front there. If we go down to our bulk shear vector, so keep that orientation in mind there. We do have quite a bit of perpendicularity with the bulk shear vector here with respect to the front. So I think there will be a window for discrete storms here throughout the late afternoon and into the evening hours and overnight hours. So that is concerning. Given the kinematic profiles here, these storms will be racing. Again, this will be after dark, I think, mostly. And that combination is never good. When you have adequate instability, strong kinematics, favorable for tornadic supercells in the trees, although this is more of the Mississippi River Delta here. But once this moves off to the east, you'll get into the trees, and this will be after dark. So that's never a good combination when you have fast-moving tornadic supercells after dark. So last thing we'll look at here, let's go take a look at some of the some of the cams here, the convective allowing models. We'll go to our HRRR first, see what that's showing. And you can see some development try to happen before 0Z here across the open warm sector from southern Illinois down into eastern Arkansas, northern Mississippi. These would have the chance to be tornadic if that cap can be broken efficiently, which I do think that is plausible. So I would not rule out supercells before dark here. Now, I think we will probably see convective activity start to tick up significantly about 0Z, so after sunset, and then we'll get kind of these scattered supercells here. So this is a concerning picture for sure when you have those kinematic profiles, that wind profile, with these kind of scattered sort of semi-discrete supercells here in the warm sector. Again, by nature, these warm sector storms do tend to be a little bit more discrete just by nature, and that's what we're seeing here on this HRRR run. And then later on in the evening, you start to get this banding of storms once the cold front catches up, and we'll see, I think, more of a linear mode there. But given what I'm seeing now, I do think we are going to see an increased likelihood for discrete tornadic supercells out here in the warm sector, just given the fact that the storm mode looks to be somewhat discrete here out in the warm sector for a while. And you will have favorable wind profiles there out in the warm sector. Again, turning with height is not the greatest we've ever seen by any means, but speed shear will be enough to overcome that. And so I think we will see a tendency for storms to remain discrete and perhaps produce strong tornadoes here after dark, which is never a good thing. Let's take a look at the ARW here, the WRF ARW model. And so this is by 0Z. We're not seeing a whole lot as far as convective initiation here in the warm sector. So that's a good thing. And, you know, not too much to be seen here. I think we will see kind of this semi-discrete mode once again here. Sort of these pock marks on the radar. So these kind of scattered semi-discrete to discrete supercells here for a few hours after dark. They would definitely have a strong tornado threat with them, and then once things congeal. So this is by 0Z. We do see some scattered development out here in the open warm sector here, western Tennessee, western Kentucky, southern Illinois. So that would be probably the area to watch first, kind of that what the SPC was highlighting here in that 15 hashed area first, and then we'll see kind of the radar fill in with kind of these bands of storms here into the overnight hours. So one last thing, let's see what the SPC is saying here. Let's see what their discussion says. This is by Rich Thompson. He's one of the best guys there, best forecasters there. So I trust him. Let's see if he's hinting at afternoon initiation. Deep layer southwesterly winds will be strong with long photographs and some low-level clockwise curvature in the warm sector. Strong vertical shear will favor supercells capable of producing a few strong tornadoes and large hail initially. So the SPC is definitely thinking of storms out in the open warm sector. And here you go. A lead shortwave trough now over the Texas South Plains will likely provide the impetus for at least widely scattered storm development in the open warm sector from Arkansas into Missouri by 21 to 0Z, with storms expected to increase in coverage along and ahead of the front overnight. So there does appear to be some window for afternoon storms. And again, I think that is definitely plausible given the nature of the capping inversion here. It's not super strong. So if we can get that lead shortwave over the Texas South Plains, let's go back and take a look at what they're talking about here. We can go to the regional sector here. Let's go back to the upper level water vapor, see if we can see it. And yeah, right there is going to be your lead shortwave right in here. So that is going to be the impetus. It's going to move off to the east and northeast, and I think that will definitely provide enough forcing to get storms to fire in the open warm sector, perhaps be at or before sunset. So we'll have to watch that closely throughout the afternoon. So a long day ahead for these regions here. Again, a moderate risk now in effect for southeast Missouri, southern Illinois, western Kentucky, and Tennessee into northeast Arkansas, mainly for a strong tornado threat in the yellow hatched area here, particularly within the red hatched area there, which would include Memphis, just outside of Jackson, Tennessee, but places like Jonesboro, Arkansas, Cape Girardeau, Missouri into southern Illinois there. So very potent system here for December standards. Going to be a long day for these areas. I do think strong tornadoes are on the table with a supercell mode, I think for a few hours. I think what I'm seeing on the models is we're going to have a few-hour window here from anywhere as early as 21Z through about 3 to 4, even 5Z. So pretty significant window for discrete tornadic supercells here throughout the day and into the overnight hours today. So if you live in these areas, stay weather aware, keep your weather radios handy, stay tuned to your local news stations. They will be doing, no doubt be doing wall-to-wall coverage here if the weather permits. So if you're in these areas, stay safe. If you're chasing, stay safe today. It's going to be a long day in the enhanced and moderate risk areas here. So that's all I've got for now. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you in the next video.